First of all, thank you for being here. So far, I mean, I've been experiencing a really, really good conference. It's the first time, and I'm saying honestly, it's the first time that I don't touch my cell phone during the presentations, really. So far, great success. It's my first time here in Dubai. Actually, it's my first time in Middle East. And I find everyone, well, thank you very much. Thank you very much. And I find people really, really welcoming. I mean, it's quite different from where I come from. Well, we Portuguese are also quite welcoming, warming, but nothing compared to what I've seen here so far. So I'm very, very happy to be here. So just to start, I'm always a little bit nervous when I start presentations. Always. It has been like that. I'm still trying to manage that. Yes?
All of us are.
Oh, okay, well, that's good. And usually the day before, I always have a conversation with my wife, always. Because I always share with her my content, not that she's in the Agile world, I mean, far from there, she works in the pharmaceutical field. But I'm always a little bit nervous, and I asked her, and I share the content, how do you think I should deliver this? How do I should be, and etc.? I mean, what do you think? And she sometimes tells me just, don't try to be funny, don't try to be polite, don't try to be intellectual. Just be yourself, and that will go smoothly, okay? So that's what I'm going to try to do today. So, to start, well, I'm wearing a white shirt, but I mean, that guy is not as good looking as I am, for sure. So what I do, currently what I'm working on, I'm working for the European Commission. I mean, they're quite busy dealing with the Brexit, or no Brexit, we'll see. And I'm essentially working as an Agile trainer. Most of the time, trainer, not even coach, because the agility movement started in the Commission not that long ago. And so we're still in the start. So I help most of the teams dealing with the concepts, with the processes, etc. The most interesting part is that we are already also demanding to start scaling this. So they already want to start also without almost having the basis. They also want to introduce an additional layer of complexity, which is quite challenging. So I'm also, I'm a safe program consultant, so I'm also trying to help them to meet that challenge. So this is most of the time what I do in my free time. I also give some training. I really like to share knowledge, but what I like most is to be with knowledge people. I really, really like to learn with knowledgeable people, and I mean that's also one of my key elements. Hobbies. I love to play drums. My neighbors don't like it that much, but I really like it. I also started playing the piano quite recently when my daughter started also having piano classes. So she asked me, Dad, can you help me? Of course I can. So I started playing the piano. I also like to work out. I believe that for what we do, especially sometimes we go through a stressful moment. So I mean, a healthy mind and a healthy body, that's my motto. So I try to work out at least, if not every day, almost like that. And I really like to eat. No, man, it looks like I really like to, no. I really like to eat, okay? Just to make it very, very clear, okay? So, and these are my directions. I mean, you can find me on LinkedIn. This is my email. This is my mobile phone. I mean, I'll be around at the end of the day, even at the dinner. So if you want to join me, I'll be happy to share with you and share some experience. You can find me anytime, okay? So, let's start. Getting to yes and delivering powerful and effective review meetings. The reason why I decided to have a talk about this topic is that I really believe that, especially people that are starting the journey, but even sometimes people already with some experience, they tend to see the review meetings as a simple demo. So we just need to go there and demo what we have achieved. And what I found out is that a lot of times the teams forget what's one of the key objectives to actually get from those meetings. You know, they want to collect feedback. They want to make sure that they are going on the right way. But on the other hand, if they are going on the right way, they need to get that confirmation. They need to know, okay, this is what we're doing well. Okay, can you tell me, can you confirm that? Can you tell me, yes, this is done, put it aside, let's continue. And sometimes this is one of the things that teams are missing. And I really believe that because we think that it's just a review meeting, is something that we just need to demo software, teams are not spending the required time to prepare this. And that's why I wanted to have this small talk about that, so that I can show you, go through to the underground of what I believe should be a proper iteration review meeting, okay? So one of the first things that I sincerely believe that can make a huge difference is the time that you spend in the preparation, okay? So like I said, it's not just about the demo, okay? It's about an additional set of steps that you need to prepare to make sure that the outcome of this demo is what you want, okay? So I believe that the team, the entire team, and not just one person, should prepare this, okay? And why is that? For me, in a review meeting, we essentially have these 3 steps, okay? And one of them is to align and review the expectations. Let me give you an example. For instance, I mean, who has kids here? Okay, so I don't know how old are your kids. My daughter, she's 8, okay? And sometimes when we go for dinner, I put a big, nice plate of fish. Can you imagine what happens when she goes to the table, right? She's expecting a big burger, or I mean, whatever. But when she sees fish, she starts, I don't want to eat. So we have a scene, and it completely ruins the atmosphere of dinner. So what I do now, well, since a couple of years, is actually before dinner, around 1 hour and a half or 2 hours before, I ask her, guess what we're going to get for dinner? She says, burgers. No, fish. And then the scene happens there. I can tackle it, and I can solve it. And by the time we get to dinner, she already knows that there's nothing to be done. So I align expectations. So it doesn't disrupt dinner. It disrupts before. This needs preparation, okay? Also the demo, you need to prepare the demo. You need to know which items you're going to demonstrate, what time of test cases you're going to use, who's going to be doing the demo, etc. Okay? And also you need to prepare the wrap-up and backlog review, because after a demo, there's a lot of things going on. You tested several scenarios, you validated several acceptance criteria, you have different items, so you need to make sure that you close and say, this was accepted, this was not accepted, what was the reason, etc. And then the backlog review, which is, with all the feedback that you got, now what's going to happen with your backlog? Okay? What are going to be the next items that we're going to work? Because we're going to have an iteration planning quite soon, and we need to make sure that our backlog is properly prepared. So we need to have this preparation. So how do we prepare this? I'm going to go through more details when we actually go to the part of the review, but essentially how I prepare this, or I encourage this to be prepared. So the first step to align the expectations is a quick PowerPoint presentation with 6 or 7 slides where you decide, where you present what was the scope of the iteration, what was achieved, what was not achieved, etc. This usually takes 30 to 45 minutes to prepare. It can be prepared 1 or 2 days in advance, but we need to make sure that I have this, so when I go to the demo, I have this alignment of expectations. Like I said, 10 minutes of a presentation is more than enough just to give people the common ground where we're going to start working, okay? So the other part is indeed the demo, okay? So we need to make sure that, and we'll see after, who's going to do the demo? Is it going to be a team member? Is it going to be the product owner? Okay. And if we're going to go through that, we need to make sure that in advance, we know which items do we actually want to demonstrate. So we need to make sure that whoever is going to do the demo is actually knowledgeable about what is going to demo, and also about the test cases that are going to be demoed. This also requires some preparation. And finally, we also need to understand that the demo can be delivered either by a product owner or by the development team or anyone else, okay? As we'll see, this will have an impact, okay? We'll see after that what's the impact of having a product owner or a development team member doing the demo, okay? But this needs to be discussed previously, okay? We need to have this agreement who's going to do the demo. Additionally, we also need to prepare what test scenarios are we going to use, because the team actually, they deliver and then develop their own test scenarios, okay? But sometimes the stakeholders and product owner, they also develop their own test scenarios, okay? So we need to know which ones do we want to use. Because what happens is sometimes if you use the test scenarios created by the stakeholders, sometimes those test scenarios are not even aligned with the acceptance criteria of your items. So sometimes you're actually testing things that you don't even care because they are not foreseen the acceptance criteria. So be careful, but we'll see that when you're using test scenarios coming from your stakeholders, okay? So essentially, these are the 3 or 4 topics that I strongly encourage you to prepare before going to a demo, okay? This is the laying down the carpet so that you can have an effective review meeting, okay? Now, with the preparation, of course, then comes the sprint review, okay? So the sprint review, we all know that should be attended by everyone involved in the demo, okay, in the product. Product owner, team, stakeholders, everyone who has a vested interest should participate on that. So as I said before, the first part of the demo is to make sure that everyone is aligned about what they're going to see, okay? So the PowerPoint presentation is one of the possible examples. I mean, you can use other type of material any way that you want. But essentially, what we want to go through is first, make sure that we present the scope. Iteration goal, compelled by the stories or the backlog items that are supposed to be delivered to achieve that goal, okay? Secondly, we define, these are the items that we have achieved. So these are the items that we want to demo, okay? This is very important because it will establish, you know, the expectations so that we know that they know that they're going to have fish for dinner, okay? And that's what we want to make sure. So that when I say that they're not going to have the meat that they wanted or the vegetables or whatever they like, it's already set up here. Usually this part might set up a few discussions, but I rather have it here when we are setting up the expectations than while we're doing the demo, because during the demo, we want the stakeholders and the product owner focused on what we have delivered, okay? We also identify new or dropped items that might happen during the iteration. So we identify them here. And finally, difficulties, impediments, and risks. The idea with this one is that you don't start a full discussion about what risks you have, how you're going to solve them. The idea is that just about full transparency. So if you had to drop an item, or if you haven't achieved an item, if you have a problem, this is where you identify. Sometimes what you can do is that you skip this section, and the difficulties that are associated with the item that you haven't achieved, you can glue that to that section, okay? But like I said, the goal here is not to try to solve, because sometimes if you go through that path, you come to the end of the time box that you have for the review, and you haven't achieved anything, okay? So be careful with this. This is just for transparency purposes. After the meeting, you can set up another meeting to discuss and see how you can target this, okay? So the alignment is made, the expectations are made, so in theory, we are ready to start our demo, okay? Now, when we start the demo, and I'm going to explain here the 3 items that I mentioned before in the preparation. So as I mentioned before, there's one thing that you should have already defined. Is it going to be a single point or a hands-on demo? Meaning, are you going to have one person doing the demo, or are you going to have all the stakeholders actually trying what you have delivered? There are benefits, pros and cons between these approaches. I'm not advocating any one of them. But I can tell you, for instance, of course, if you have everyone trying, of course, it's more interesting for all the stakeholders than having just one person. But of course, when you have everyone trying, in terms of facilitation, it requires more attention, because you want to make sure that everyone is focused on what you are testing, okay? The second point is, should we have a product owner or should we have a team member doing the demo? Usually, I link these 2 items. If I have a single point demo, I actually like to have the product owner doing the demo. And why is that? Because when you have a product owner doing a demo, the stakeholders, which the product owner represent, will feel more connected to him, will feel, you know, a little bit more trust in the person that is doing the demo, which means that at the end, when you want to collect their commitment, they will be more eager to do so because there's someone, you know, that they trust doing showing the product that they are seeing, okay? On the other hand, for instance, if I have an hands-on demo, means that I will have someone guiding the session, but I'll have everyone actually trying. In that particular case, I found usually the most effective way is to have a member from the development team guiding it, and that leaves the product owner free to actually go through all the stakeholders and help them to keep up to speed with what's happening in the demo. Okay, so as you can see, you have this interconnection. These are my personal experience. Of course, you can try any combinations that you like, but usually this works fine. Now, of course, if you have, be careful, if you have, and this goes to the next topic, when you start using test cases, if you use the test cases from the team, usually it works well when you have your development team member doing the demo, okay? If you have your test cases, you use test cases that are delivered by your stakeholders, this requires some additional preparation precisely because you want to make sure that the test cases that are being followed, they actually represent something meaningful, okay? So if you have test cases, and we'll see after that, that are not linked to anything, to any acceptance criteria, you run the risk of wasting your time trying to demo something that was not foreseen, okay? And the role of the product owner, which, by the way, if he's presenting, he needs to know all the items in advance. The role of the product owner is to actually help your development team member to guide the stakeholders throughout all those test scenarios, okay? So these are 3 key topics that you need to make sure that they are all properly prepared in advance before you start your demo, okay? Now, when you start the demo, you go through all the items that the team believe that they have achieved. So for each one of them, they should identify the name of the item, they should give a brief description, and if necessary, well, not necessary, they should identify the test cases that they're going to go through. But more important than identifying the test cases is actually to link those test cases to something meaningful. And that something meaningful is the acceptance criteria that the team and the product owner have agreed to establish for each item, okay? This is what will give a vision to the stakeholders and the product owner of what is being tested. So the idea is that for each item that you present, that you identify and describe, you also indicate this is the acceptance criteria. And then, when you describe the test scenarios that you're going to go through, you should establish a link. So when you say, we're going to go through this test scenario, and this test scenario actually is linked with this particular acceptance criteria, which is what you want to verify at the end. Because most of the time, the acceptance criteria is part of the definition of done. So you want to make sure that your acceptance criteria is actually compliant. But for that, you use test scenarios, and the test scenarios need to be linked. So this approach, my experience shows us that it gives context to the stakeholders. It gives context to everyone, so they know exactly, but why am I testing this? They know exactly they are testing that because we want to validate that particular acceptance criteria, okay? So when you have this, and let's suppose that an item has verified all the acceptance criteria, then what we need to ask is, okay, the acceptance criteria is verified, but is it actually the definition of done verified? For instance, do we have, I don't know, this item delivered, for instance, in the acceptance environment? Do we have specific documentation for this? Is the code with unit testing covered, I don't know, 70, 100, 80%, doesn't matter? If we have indeed the definition of done, we need to actually ask the question. So, is this accepted? Can we close this? Is this done? And this is, believe it or not, is where I've seen most of the teams lacking. Teams, I don't know if it's, well, now I know and I'll explain you why. Teams, it looks like they are afraid to ask this question, okay? But don't forget, this is one of the purposes of this meeting. Collect feedback. If there's something to be corrected, you get that feedback. If something doesn't need to be corrected, if everything is okay, then you need to collect that feedback and assume it. Is it done? Yes, definitely it's done. And last year I attended a talk given by Ye Young. So this gentleman here, he actually wrote a book about rejection and the fear about rejection. And how the fear of rejection sometimes makes us prevent us to ask difficult questions. Okay? What we believe is a difficult question because we are afraid of rejection. And most of the times what I've seen is exactly that. Teams are afraid to ask, is it done? Because they are afraid to hear no. Okay? So what we do is, and this is my blessing to him, is that actually we need to overcome this fear, which there are several ways to do it. That's not the purpose of this talk. But this is what we need to push for it. Make sure that the teams ask the question. When you verify, is it this, 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 is it okay? Yes, it is. It's done, isn't it? Yes, it is. And then we'll proceed to the next one, okay? So when it's done, essentially, we go to our item and mark as it done, and we proceed to the next one. So this process will iterate until we have completed all the items that the team believed that they were completed, okay? The ones that they have achieved, that they have presented initially when they set the context, all those items that were achieved. Now, after that, we have our wrap-up. So as you can imagine, and you have all experienced this, when you are on an iteration review, you have different test scenarios coming in, stories being analyzed, and etc. So you want to make sure that at the end, you have a clear picture of what was happening, okay? So what we're going to do is, for each of those items, we want to identify the ones that were completed, meaning according to the definition done, were done. But we also want to identify which items were not done. But especially with that, we need to know what was the reason. It needs to be clear. Is it because a specific test scenario failed that prevented the acceptance criteria from being fulfilled? Is it because a piece of documentation was needed? Is it because the code was not properly tested? All these items that are part of the definition of done need to be properly identified when I say this was not accepted. And even, and sometimes I see this resistance, based on the knowledge and the learning that the stakeholders and the product owner get in the iteration review, sometimes they feel the need to actually change, for instance, the acceptance criteria. And that happens. And sometimes teams resist to that. But actually, my opinion is, if I don't get that feedback, it means one of two things. Either what we did was perfect, or that the stakeholders don't care about what I'm doing. Most of the time is the second one. So what I tell to the teams is that if you're getting feedback, it's good because they are paying attention and they are actually interested on that. So even if I have things that in theory were okay, but during that iteration review, the stakeholders mentioned that, oh, if I knew it was like that, then we should have changed it. Even when it's not the case, that's fine. You say that it's not compliant, you make it very clear what was not compliant, and then you proceed to the next, okay? So this is part of the wrap-up exercise. Now, what happens with the wrap-up is that it will provide you inputs to your backlog review, because don't forget, the outcome of your iteration review should be not only have a set of items that were completed, but the ones that are not completed, they should set a set of actions for the next iteration planning. Meaning, what's going to happen is we're going to have items that were not done, were not according to definition of done. So we need to know what we're going to do. Are they going to go back to the backlog, to the next iteration backlog? Are they going to go down in priorities? What's going to happen to them? Also, we will need to know, okay, new items that have surfaced during the iteration, bugs that are required to resolve immediately because the system is in production. Okay, what are we going to do with this? Dropped items. Were those items dropped in terms of priority? Were they actually taken out from the backlog? Okay, so all this stuff that came from the wrap-up that you did before, now that you have in the backlog review, you need to make sure that you get that information so that you get your backlog properly organized. Okay, don't forget that. We want to make sure that not only we collect feedback, but we use that feedback to have our backlog properly organized. Okay. One of the things that is also very important is that, for instance, when you have, and it's part of normally grooming sessions, but you can actually do that also in the iteration review because you have everyone that is needed there, is if I have new items, I might need to provide, my team might need to provide fundamental information to the stakeholders, which is, for instance, the stakeholders have an idea in relative size about the size of the items. That's very important information so that they can prioritize. Because if I tell them, this new item that you have here actually takes the same amount, as big as the other 3 or 4 items that you have in the backlog, they might say that the priority is actually lower. Okay, so this information is actually quite important. And if you have everyone there in the room, if you have 1 or 2 items, you can actually, the team can actually do that exercise immediately. So that will help the product owner and the stakeholders properly prioritize it, okay? So when you have all of this, it means that your stakeholders and your product owner, especially the product owner, is able now to set the order in your backlog, okay? Once again, are the new items going to the top? Are the items that were not done also go to the top, or they go a little bit lower? What happens to the dropped items? They go very low in the backlog. Are they taken out? This is what you want to achieve so that you start, when you start the next iteration planning, all this stuff is organized and you can actually start immediately, okay? So essentially, this is what we want to achieve. A prioritized backlog with all the initiatives, all the things that came up from your wrap-up, properly organized so that the team can use it, okay? So once again, this is what I was just saying. So this is what we want to be able to start our iteration planning, okay? So in a nutshell, don't forget, first key element, preparation. Make sure that you prepare your review meeting, okay? Prepare your presentation, whatever you want to do with PowerPoint, doesn't matter. Make sure that includes your scope, items achieved, not achieved, risks, impediments, new, dropped items, etc., okay? Secondly, make sure that when you prepare, you know who's going to do what. So who's going to present your demo, product owner, your development team. Make sure that you prepare also which test cases do you want to use, okay? During the demo, don't forget, 10 minutes for the alignment of the expectations. Then while doing the demo, make sure that you properly present all the items that you want to demo. Make sure that every time you have your test cases, you map them with the acceptance criteria. Give this context to your product owner and all the stakeholders, okay? At the end, don't forget the wrap-up. The wrap-up is fundamental so that you get everyone aligned with what just happened, okay? So which items were validated, which items were not according to the definition of done, what's the reason for not being according to the definition of done, and then finally, use that information to make sure that your backlog is properly prioritized. If you do this, my experience tells me that at the end, you'll have everything that you need to proceed seamlessly to the next iteration planning. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your time. Questions and answers? I think we still have, quite some time for some questions. Yes?
Question is because now sprint review is done and we have some items which are shippable, which we know that we presented and business owners have accepted that. Now what do you think, what is like, I want to know from your side, how basically you are doing in your organization, like after that what happens, you normally ship that product as is or again you go back to business owners to get a formal confirmation again from their side and then release it?
So one thing that we do is, a lot of them, they always ask for acceptance testing, okay, which is an additional step. And I'm fine with that. But what I always ask, and don't confuse saying that this is done, because sometimes they believe that, oh, this is done, so it means that if I found a bug, you'll never touch it again. It doesn't, it's not that what it means. And sometimes you see business and product owners reluctant to do that because they have that belief. So what I always say is that if this is done, it means that we all agree that it's done, it's what you want, so we'll put it aside. Does it mean that you can't change it? No, it doesn't. It means that the team will no longer need to worry about that unless context changes, you need some change, a bug is found, okay? But the purpose here is to tell the product owner, we don't need to worry with this anymore because we agreed so far that this is how it to be done. But make sure that he's confident enough to say, in the future, if you want to change, that's fine by us. And if you have bugs, of course, we'll correct them. I hope I answered the question. Okay, thank you. Any more questions? I guess we have more time for cookies and coffee. And networking, there you go. Yes.
And also, I believe potentially shippable product is a technical decision and delivery
Is there a mic? Sorry, because I can't, I think there's a micro here.
No. The potentially shippable product is a technical decision. Maybe delivery is a business decision.
Yes, precisely. And deploying and releasing, two different things, two concepts that should be completely separated, okay? Just to be very clear, I didn't go to that detail, but develop on cadence and release on demand, okay? Don't forget that.
So the focus of any sprint that we do should not be necessarily the end product. It can be decided with the product owner that we are going to do this in stages, and as the stage is done and the objectives are met, that particular is closed, that particular subject is closed, and we can move on.
For me, the end of each iteration, you deliver value. The value might be a piece of document, it might be a process improvement, might be a piece of software. Solutions doesn't have to be just software. A solution might be software, process improvement, piece of legal legislation. As long as at the end of each iteration, I can show tangible progress that brings value to them, doesn't matter. What kind of shape does it have? Okay. Yeah.
Now, for the test cases that we use for the review, for example, if the stakeholders give these test cases to whoever will review, will do the meeting review, in the meeting review itself, should he accept them or
No,
it should be given
before, yeah, because otherwise, I mean, you see how can these actually assume proportions if you don't prepare it properly? I mean, if it's the first time that the team is even going to see test cases, even for the person who's demonstrating, okay, what do I need to do? These are, you see what I mean? So especially if you're collecting those test cases from the stakeholders, you have two concerns. First, you need to make sure that you get familiarized with them. Secondly, I mean, actually the first one should be, do actually these test cases are aligned with what we expect to be achieved from each of these items. So if I have my acceptance criteria that this needs to deliver or behave like A, and someone is saying, we're going to test this to see if it behaves like C, I mean, it's a waste of time. And needs to be properly explained, and sometimes I've seen this. You think that you're going to save time, and I saw this happening quite a few times. Oh yeah, let's have the business doing the test cases. Whoa, more time for us. But the problem is that when you start seeing the test cases that you receive, you have to spend so much more time educating them to write proper test scenarios that the time that you spend overcomes a lot the time that you would spend if you'd done the test cases by yourself. I've seen this happening almost every time. Okay? Sorry, yeah.
So what would you do differently if the review meetings are being done virtually, basically having stakeholders in different countries, for example? Would you do anything differently?
No, I just make sure that I would have, and this just because in the commission we have all these means, so I'm lucky to have all of that. But the purpose, I wouldn't change it, okay? But I would make sure that we could have at least the common part, because I try to have it in a small time slot, but at least I would have everyone in the same, I mean, I didn't want to have people in their sleeping hours attending a review meeting, okay? But I'm lucky enough that in the commission, we have all the necessary means, I mean, high band, high resolution screens, all this stuff that allow us to do that. Although the difference in terms of time slots, in terms of time zones, is actually 1 or 2 hours maximum. So we usually don't get those problems. But from a conceptual point of view, I wouldn't change anything, okay? But easier said than done. Okay. I admit that I haven't gone to many experiences to have people from 10 hours or 11 hours different time slot. I haven't done yet, I admit it. Okay. So if any one of you has done that and has inputs to share outside during the coffee, I'll be more than happy to hear about that. Okay. There was one more question, yeah.
Thank you, first of all. And my next question is like, because in our case, like we are running multiple sprints with different teams, which are working on one common goal actually at the end of the day, because there are many teams involved in this. So what do you say? Should we have a common review for them, or we should have still the review for each sprint separate?
So scaling. So one thing, don't forget, and can I use this? Oh, I think it's the first time that I'm drawing in a presentation, but anyway. So for me, you have, let's suppose, simplifying 3 teams, okay? They are all working in the context of one big solution, okay? But this big solution is split into several features, probably each team implementing each of these features. Each team probably has their own product owner because you need to split the features into smaller chunks, for instance, stories, so that you can see progress throughout every iteration. So let's suppose these are the iterations, okay? Each team individually has the responsibility to show progress to their product owners. So my answer to your first question is yes, each one of them should conduct their individual review meeting. Secondly, because you are working in an integrated solution, you should conduct then an overall system demo with their own specific test cases, which is where you're going more into the achievement of the feature. So yes, you should also have a review meeting to actually show the integrated progress of all the teams. This is why it's important, first of all, to have the same cadence, meaning 2 or 3 weeks, but also synchronization. Because if you have teams working in 3 weeks, but in different time frames, the possibility for them to meet each other and to do this system demo is smaller. I hope I answered the question. Thank you.
It's called sprint then. It's called sprint demo.
Yep.
Yeah, I have a question
Yep.
related to this. So during this sprint review, so how do you make sure that the test scenarios that you're utilizing for the delivery of the delivery aspects of that sprint, while you are ensuring that you have met the delivery of that sprint, you're not actually spoiling something from the previous sprint, so how the regression aspect?
Great questions. That's why you're still talking in this context, right?
No, I'm talking about the same team, but you're delivering potentially shippable products, but not had a release yet.
Okay.
But you want to make sure that your test scenarios downstream are also covering what you had ready earlier. So the downstream is not impacting your upstream.
Oh, okay. Well, that's why we have, and this when you start scaling this, but actually not just scaling, but actually individual teams, that's why we want to have automated testing and unit testing and continuous integration and continuous deployment. Because that's how we actually guarantee that I'm always running, if I understand your question correctly. If I didn't, please let me know. What I want to make sure that I'm able to run on an automated way all the tests that I've done so far, even I'm not concerned about their purpose, but they are there because sometimes I'm changing something that might impact the result of the test that I had before. Because let's make it clear. I'm not expecting, because the only way that I need to guarantee quality is testing and testing and testing every time I put something into my development stream for my main solution. But it's not feasible to have manual testing every time I do that. So we rely on the automated testing. And for me, the concept of DevOps is no longer optional. It's about how often do you do it, how good or bad you do it. Okay, so I always make sure that the tests that I did, I recorded it, I execute them then and again. Because otherwise, if I don't do that, I'm going to have the problem just like you were trying to point. I will probably forget some of the test scenarios that I had to do while I'm testing here. I can't forget that I'm building a solution incrementally. So if now I'm focused on here, if I don't have a way to automatically test it here, because there's no way I can constantly manually keep testing all of this, if I don't have a way to automatically test this, somewhere in the future, I'm going to have problems here, that's for sure. I hope I answered the question. Okay, thank you. I think we have, I mean, I'm not controlling. Do you still have?
5 minutes.
Okay, any more questions? Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. If you have more questions, I'll be outside. Thank you.